Thothma applied himself to impart wisdom to all men, and during his reign he built in the land of Egypt 77 colleges of great learning, 12 colleges of prophecy, 200 houses of philosophy, 7 adepteries, and 3,000 free schools, and 4,000 houses of sacrifice to Osiris, saviour of men. 340 obelisks to God, 30 triumphal arches to Deus, and these were mounted on pedestals of polished stone and stood at the street corners. And they were graduated to the rank of adept. During Thothma's reign, more than 4,000 men and 300 women, all capable of the death trance and of going about in spirit. And of these, over 700 were permitted within 30 years to test the cast of the holy chambers in the pyramid, and their spirits were conducted into Osiris' heavenly regions and sojourned there for many days and returned to their bodies unharmed. Because of the position of the chambers, there was no action upon their bodies whilst in the swoon. Thus did Thothma prove himself to be one of the wisest and greatest men that ever dwelt on the face of the earth. He believed all things the gods told him, believed he was Thoth reincarnated, and believed he would never die as to the flesh. The false Osiris, through his servant god Egupt, had said to Thothma, "This is the manner of heaven and earth as regards man. All men are reincarnated over and over until perfected to immortal flesh. And in that day, man has so perfected his ability to be an adept that he can remain on earth or ascend to heaven, even when he desires. Hence of all knowledge, adeptism is the greatest." Thothma asked if there were any new creations. Satan prompted Osiris, who said, "No, your spirit is old as the earth. At first it was small and round like a grain of mustard, only it was spirit. And the multitude of these seeds comprises the all unseen. When one of them takes root in gestation, then is the beginning. And it is born into the world a frog or an ass or worm or lion or small creeping thing, and it lives its time and dies. And the spirit goes back again into another womb, and it is born forth a man low as to knowledge, evil as to life. And he lives a time and dies again. But again the spirit goes back to another womb, and it is born forth again another man, but wiser as to knowledge and less evil as to life. And this continues to hundreds of generations and to thousands. But he who has attained adeptship has it in his power to call forth out of the earth his own corporeality. He needs no longer to go through the filth of others. Thothma was wise even in his belief. For when he was growing old and beholding his flesh sunken and his eyes growing hollow and dim and his hands getting withered, he inquired of the gods, saying, "I know you have taught me truth, O God. I am weak before you as to judgment and curious in my vanity." Osiris said, "Speak you, O king." Thothma said, "By all the force of my will, and by my great learning, I cannot stay the withering of the flesh. If therefore I already dry up like a mummy above the power of my will, how will it be with me when I am further emaciated?" Osiris answered the king, "Until you are even more emaciated, you cannot understand the power of your own soul." With this the king was reconciled, and even at the time he was tottering on his last legs, he began to build a new palace, saying, "After I have changed this flesh into immortal flesh, hither will I come and live forever. And I shall be surrounded by adepts, wise and faultless. And this shall be the first colony of the kind I will build on the earth. But afterward I will build many colonies of like kind, more and more of them, until I have all the earth redeemed to immortal flesh. For of such shall be my kingdom, and all men and all women on the earth shall know me as Lord of all." Nevertheless, with all Thothma's wisdom and the wisdom of his gods, he fell on a stone and died suddenly on the day he was 100 years old. When Thothma was quite dead, the priests carried his body into the temple, fully believing his spirit would return from heaven and transform the body from corruptible into incorruptible flesh to live forever. And they laid the corpse in the place previously designated by the gods and sealed it up according to the commands of the false Osiris, saviour of men. Osiris had said, "Whoso believeth in me, him will I save to everlasting life. And though he lose his body, yet again shall he find it, and the corruptible flesh shall be changed in the twinkling of an eye, and become incorruptible to life everlasting, with the spirit that abides therein." On the 5th day the priests opened the chamber, for according to the laws of miracles, on that day the spirit should accomplish the feat. But lo and behold, it came not, and the body still lay cold and dead. But the gods came in spirit form and said to the priests, "Seal you up the body for other 5 days." And the priests did as commanded, and after that they examined it again, but life had not returned. Again they were commanded to seal it up for other 5 days, which they did, but life returned not. The high priest inquired of Osiris concerning the matter. And Osiris, through his servant god Egupt, answered him, saying, "Go fetch a young man who is warm in the blood, which is life in the flesh, and he shall be the 7th son of an adept, and know how to cast himself in death." The priests brought Xaian, who was in his 24th year, and when he came into the holy chamber he was bid cast himself in death for benefit of the king's soul. And Xaian thus cast himself, and he was sealed in the chamber of death for 5 days along with the king's corpse. And in 5 days the priests brought both bodies into the holy chamber, according to instructions. And Osiris came and commanded them to stand around the bodies. And when they had done so, the angels from Osiris's kingdom came and spirited away the body of the king, and they brought back the spirit of Xaian to inhabit the body of Xaian and put it in possession thereof, making believe it was the spirit of Thothma returned. The high priest said to the gods, "Where is the body of Thothma? Has it been transformed?" And the gods answered, "It has gone to heaven and will return after many days. But as to the spirit of the king, behold, he is with you." And the priests spoke to Xaian, believing it was Thothma. And after 3 days they came forth out of the temple and recrowned Xaian Thothma II. And they proclaimed it abroad that these things were true, howbeit they knew to the contrary. As to the spirit of Thothma, at the time of death, it was taken to Argo-Arden and put amongst the servants of Osiris's heavenly kingdom, and thus enslaved. So Xaian became king of Egypt. Now, as regards the false gods, Osiris and his confederates, they never tried to reincarnate the spirit of Thothma, but because of the virtues and the wisdom of Thothma, they used him for benefit of Osiris's heavenly kingdom and to establish Osiris everlastingly on the earth as the all-highest god. As to the kingdoms of the land of Egypt, which succeeded Thothma, the inhabitants of the earth already know the chief part. For hundreds and hundreds of years, the Egyptians were the most learned people in the world, and especially in knowledge of the stars and the sun and moon, and in adeptism and miracles. But woe came to them. The land became flooded with hundreds of millions of low spirits. And as to the people of Egypt, the chief desire was to be able to return in spirit after death and live with mortals. And the things which followed are not even lawful to mention. Suffice it, these spirits lost all sight of any higher heavens than to live on the earth. They knew no other. And they watched about when children were born and obsessed them, driving hence the natural spirit, and growing up in the new body of the newborn, calling themselves reincarnated. And these drujas professed that when they previously lived on earth they were great kings or queens or philosophers. And they taught as their master Osiris, the false, did, that there was no higher heaven than here on the earth, and that man must be reincarnated over and over until the flesh became immortal. Not all of these spirits drove hence the natural spirit, but many merely engrafted themselves on the same body. And while such persons lived, these spirits lived with them and dwelt with them day and night, not knowing more than their mortal companion. And when such person died, behold, the druja went and engrafted itself on another child and lived and dwelt with it in the same way, and thus continuing generation after generation. And because of these indulgences, many of the spirits came in spirit form in the families of the Egyptians, eating and drinking with them corporeally, yes, and even doing things whereof no man may speak, whereby dire disease seized upon the flesh of mortals, and their blood and their flesh became inhabited with vermin. The people became idlers and vagrants, the lands were not tilled, and the places of learning became deserted ruins.